Got a merger bill. Do you think that holds out any promise for
Which?
lowering costs? The merger bill that's
Oh.
under consideration.
Well, it sounds like more suggestions than real strong teeth in that bill based on what I've seen. And I've just heard from my staff that the Education Challenges for Change proposal doesn't seem to have a lot of teeth either. We need to solve a $96 million problem in school spending, and they're struggling to get to the $23 million target that's in the Challenges for Change. So I don't know how they're going to do it.
They say they have 32 million in challenges. Do you think that that is really 32 million?
I don't know, Terry. Based on what I'm hearing from some of the deliberations in individual areas, I'm skeptical. And their answer is raid the reserves, use the rainy day funds. Well, you know, that's not a good answer.
Well, I thought the answer, at least the way I understood it, was that if the 38 couldn't be achieved at the end of, by the end of next year, then 10 million could be tapped. Not that it was booked now.
Well, they're also
Isn't
proposing.
that an emergency? No, it doesn't.
No.
You're saying that's planning to fail?
Because they're also putting in the budget some very restrictive language that limits the ability of the administration to manage the money. They've got proposed language that says Secretary Lunderville or I have to go to the Joint Fiscal Committee and get permission to do what we're supposed to do to balance the budget, and that's not acceptable.
Can you be more specific about that, sir? What do you mean exactly?
Well, the budget obviously can't be precise because we don't know exactly what the revenues are going to be at the end of the fiscal year, and up to 1% of a gap may be addressed by the Secretary of Administration making certain decisions. But if the legislature is going to say you have to go to the Joint Fiscal Committee to get approval of things, when they're unable to make decisions about curtailing spending now, I'm not sure that we're going to get where we need to be. And that's why I think the accessing the rainy day funds is probably more than theoretical.
On the taxes, my understanding from what they just said, let's see, Bill, of course, the production reduction is gone, no vitamins. It's the rolling tobacco thing that was, it's more of a clarification. So, but you're saying they didn't do estate and capital gains, that's right.
Yeah, those are a couple of $1 million, and that's fine, but we have a long way to go. The budget that they're talking about relies on the 21 million or so in taxes that they raised last year. Gosh, when someone comes to the jobs forum, their jobs forum, and says the single most important thing you can do to create more jobs in Vermont is roll back the capital gains tax increase, weren't they listening?
So you vetoing this budget?
I made it very clear that I don't see a budget that I'm going to support at this point. I think we need to see some real progress on the estate tax, on the capital gains tax, and on school property taxes, which continue to rise beyond the ability of most Vermonters to pay them.
Where did you come up with the $96 million figure?
What I'm suggesting is that we move from the 10.1 range, 10 to 1 school student-teacher ratio to 13 to 1, which would still make us fairly low in terms of the national average, and we can gain the $96 million. And what we need that for is to fill the gap that is likely to be transferred in order to meet their objective of not raising the school property tax in fiscal 2012. They can't have it both ways. They say we're going to keep the school property taxes level at 86 cents for residents, $1.36 for non-residents, but that assumes more money transferred from the general fund. Well, then there's this big hole of about 96 million or 100 million or so, and I don't have confidence that they can make the kind of reform to fill that gap. I think they're going to plan to raise more taxes in substantial numbers in fiscal 2012. I mean, their own Joint Fiscal Committee graph shows a huge 5-year shortfall, $848 million. As I've explained to all of you before, economists say that a couple of years following the recession are the toughest. That's when people are just getting back to work. They aren't earning They aren't earning a lot yet. The jobs haven't been created, their portfolios haven't rebounded, and yet the services demand is still quite strong. So that's why we're in this for a few more years, and the legislature has to make some tough choices. You don't have to make the same ones I recommended, but you've got to make some decisions.
So, Governor, I have a question about the property tax. This is a tricky business because of local control. And I guess I'm wondering, if you did have a cap on the student-to-teacher ratio, wouldn't that mean that it's sort of a backdoor way of closing small schools in the state? Because there are a lot of schools that do have a low number of students per teacher, and so they wouldn't be able to meet that kind of blanket requirement.
That's true. In the old Granby school, which had 6 kids and had a 6-to-1 ratio, we wouldn't say if that teacher retired, we wouldn't replace it. I mean, that school's closed now. But obviously, there are some variations that have to be respected. And my recommendation is either that the supervisory union handle it at that level, or the Commissioner of Education have some authority. But these are details. The fundamental goal has to be to reduce that level of school spending so we don't see what we did last year, 1,600 fewer kids and 218 more employees. That just isn't sustainable.
What would you tell House Republicans about suspending rules tomorrow?
Well, I don't give them recommendations on procedural matters. They'll make their decision on that. I could say, as a former legislator, I kind of like to understand what was in a bill before I voted on it. But I'll leave that to the caucus.
So we hear legislators talk all the time about the fiscal restraint that local school boards showed during the last round of budgeting. You disagree?
No, and I applaud school directors for reducing the rates of increase that we've seen in the recent past. I think they did a good job, and it's not an easy job. I've got a lot of relatives who've served on school boards through the years, and I appreciate what school directors do. But we still have a dramatic drop-off that's going to continue for some time in our student count, and per pupil spending still went up last year, even though overall spending was relatively level. So we've got to recognize that this burden is unsustainable. We can't be number 2 in America in school property tax burden, or total property tax burden, and expect people to afford to live here.
And so there needs to be some centralized authority over school spending, you
Well, I
think?
recognize that we have a long tradition of local control, and I certainly respect that. But when we have a state education fund, when we divert state general revenues like sales tax and purchase and use tax into that fund, when we have a funding formula that's run by the state, I think the taxpayers of Vermont have an interest in controlling spending. We have to find a way to do it. And as I said before, and I said to the legislators, I've given you my ideas, which are look at the ratio, require 20% insurance premium payment. But I'm happy to hear your ideas. Just do something to address the property tax burden.
All right, they're wrapped it up.
So in these talks, what were you giving? In these talks, I mean, what were you willing to give up?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer
Well, I
that.
mean, if, so they put the production reduction, I guess, on the table, so they're giving that up. What were you willing to give up?
Well, I'm willing to continue the conversation with them about different ideas. I don't want to negotiate through the press, but we had a couple of ideas on the table. But I made it clear fundamentally that we need to have a budget that is sustainable, that's fiscally responsible, and we have worked together on a number of things: the UI fund issue, the challenges for change. But I asked legislators at one of our meetings to name one of my initiatives that they've embraced this year. I didn't hear one.
All right, thank you.